Welcome to Scrap It again. From Dwellings Group, on behalf of Dwellings Group, we wish you a prosperous and healthy new year in this COVID-19 situation. And the whole purpose of today's discussion is to go through the real estate situation in Australia, your investment opportunities, how to go through this difficult time, and also the legal implications and opportunities. To discuss all these real estate and financial and legal related aspects, we have a panel of distinguished guests here. Hi, everyone.
Hi, everyone.
And we have Josh Cunningham, sales manager from Heritage Homes. And on this side, we have prominent migration lawyer from Melbourne, Susantha Kadugampala. And we have Tikshana Somradna, director from Dwellings Group. And today we are going to have a friendly discussion on these global aspects and situations here to go through. And I would like to start this discussion from Josh. Just now, everyone is spectacle about that real estate industry in Australia is going to have a huge hit. I think that is obvious, but there are opportunities behind that as well.
Yeah, of course. With any pandemic, there comes a lot of time where there is opportunity. If you look at the GFC in 2008 and what happened with the property market thereafter, in Melbourne, the property market bounced back by over 15% in the first 5 years. The property pricing has come down a little bit before now. I think it will come down immediately, and there'll be a lot of incentives out there. As an example, there's an estate in the north where they've reduced their price by $20,000, but I don't think that they're going to do that again in 2 to 3 months. A developer just won't be able to do that.
Yeah.
So I see that now is probably the time where people are going to get the best value for money.
Yeah.
There's interest rates that are at the lowest they've ever been. So when the market does bounce back and people are able to do more inspections and things like that, the market will be very, very buoyant.
Yeah.
You're going to get a lot of capital growth immediately. There's people that are going to want to be first-time buyers. There's investors that never want to be in this situation ever again. If this pandemic has hurt them financially, the next one will ultimately come. It's always a bit of a cycle. There'll be another one later, but they never want to be in the situation that they're in now. If they've lost their job and they're not financially fit or healthy, now's the time to be buying a property investment or getting into the market, because you don't want to be in this situation again. You want to look at it. You want to look at it and go, I'm happy it happened, because now when the next one comes, I'm in a great spot.
Right.
So I think that's the biggest thing that people have got to take out of it is, don't be in this position again. Look at when the best time is to buy. And in my mind, the time to be buying is now.
And I think, Josh, actually, as a government, when the situations, the starting point, the Australian government reacted very wisely to face the situation, I think. And at that time, Australian budget was in a near surplus situation.
Yeah.
Which is a great starting point when you compare to the rest of the world.
Yeah.
And that obviously going to have an impact on recovering on this situation.
Yeah, of course. I think if you take a little bit of a step back and you look at the figures on Australian cases that are currently in Australia, I think that they're doing extremely well if you compare them to other parts of the world. Medically, I think we're at the forefront and going close to finding a vaccine. And we've also done some really fantastic things from a government point of view with the initiative. I think we've spent over $3 billion on the JobKeeper initiative, the New Starter initiative, and a number of other things. Now childcare is free, and the government is there now for the people. Not only the government, but the banks are there for the people as well. We've reduced interest rates. We're there to help. So I think all of those things are making it a really positive time for Australia. Australia's always been a great place to be purchasing property.
Yeah. I think Josh, yes, definitely we got a lot of things to talk about this as well. In terms of, I'm going to turn into Susantha as well. Susantha, now you've been involved in a lot of this COVID-19 situation in Sri Lanka, and you've been seeing this situation, how it handled in Australia as well. You are one of the best person to compare between Australia and Sri Lanka, and how well this whole situation has handled, and what are the legal implications for our investors, and what supports available from the government as well.
I see this as not just a health crisis, it's a health, economic, and it can be a social crisis.
Yeah.
Therefore, how the government's managing this crisis is very important. And I'm very proud and pleased that the Sri Lankan government, where we come from, and our home country, our motherland, competently managed this problem. And Sri Lanka has done very well. And that's the credit to Sri Lanka. And now we are here. And we're also very pleased that the Australian government is competently handling this now. And the Australian government, the Prime Minister, and especially where we are in Victoria, the Victorian Premier is competently doing an excellent job in managing this problem. And the government has given $300 billion to the economy, to the country, to manage this problem. That's a huge amount of money. And Australia can afford to do that because we have a $1.5 trillion economy. And that's a big economy. And that shows that Australia is one of the important countries in the world, and Australia is taking a forefront when you look up to US or any other European countries. And I think for future, people should look up to countries like Australia or New Zealand in the West. Therefore, the demand for Australia will grow, continue to grow. And therefore, I think the Australia will have a lot of demand for immigration. And the Australian government definitely will have some restriction to choose the best out of the best people. But investor migration, investment is very important to the Australian economy because when you recover from an economic crisis, you need to have the new investments coming in. Therefore, what you guys talking is very important for future of the Australian economy.
And also, Susant, I think Australian government has to implement some regulations of foreigners buying businesses here. All of a sudden, there was a growth and there's a spike of people trying to buy Australian businesses and shares, which shows the demand from outside of the world to get ownership of in Australia.
There are two aspects to it. One thing is that's important economically for government to have investments coming in, but that should be done with some control. And it's important politically we should have a good control because otherwise the things are down at the moment. Therefore, we don't want the wrong people to buy or this to go into the wrong hands. So therefore, the government is selective in opening the opportunities. And it's always been there for property. And there are restrictions in agriculture land and more restrictions than residential property, as we know. But I think the government will continue to have some restrictions, which is good for the Australian economy to have that control. But Australian government should consider to promote investments, bring more investments. Every country is very important. I think Sri Lanka should do the same.
Same thing,
We hope that Sri Lanka will be a great destination for Western expatriates to migrate and return home in years to come.
Only feeling as well.
And therefore, this is a challenge, but the challenge will always end up with new opportunities. It's how we take the opportunities is the key.
And also, Josh and Tikshana, now we have seen a lot of support from Australian government for businesses as well as individuals, in terms of monetarily pay your rents, pay your business debts, manage your cash flow. That all shows the Australian government has a vision to run the economy without collapsing and reducing job losses. And this is directly impacting and helping to get the recovery down. What are the, if you can...
Sanjay, if you look at the property market, there are two things. If you look at the short-term growth, last year alone we had about 8.2% growth. But when you look at the last quarter ending from January, still there was about 4.2 growth. And last January, there was about 2% growth in the property market in Melbourne. And long term, if you look at the entire, migration process, the population growth, Melbourne is expecting about 120,000 people every year. And if you look at the supply of the houses, that's about 70,000. So there is a gap between the supply and demand. So we are going through a rough patch, but when you look at the entire picture, long term, there's always growth. So right now, what the government is doing now with the 300 billion stimulus package, which supports individuals, the businesses, government is trying to keep the businesses running. And as soon as we exit from this situation, the property prices will boom.
And I think that the whole economy will come back in just such a buoyant way. In my mind, the first thing people are going to want to do is get out of their house and spend some money. whether it's going to the pub and having a beer or whether it's going down to the shops, people now
Have your social life back.
yeah, exactly. People are now somewhat so enclosed and refined to their own houses. Australia's done a fantastic job of locking the virus down and stopping the spread. But I think the economy in itself is going to bounce back, not just property prices, but I think everything in general.
Yeah.
In relation to education, do you see how Australia has handled the situation in the way that we've contained it, and also the medical research that's going on? Is that going to assist with migration as well? Is that something to be
Absolutely. Australia has done a great job by offering online education.
Yep.
And that's in the school levels and the
Even from prep
Kindergarten.
kindergarten level,
kindergarten
is
to
unbelievable.
the primary and the secondary and the university education.
Yeah.
And I think we're making an example and precedent to have this system for future. So we're basically building a great system for future where people can have lots of flexibility in terms of education, rather just walk into a classroom and have education.
Yeah.
But still, if you get the same quality of education, if you have access to the same material, and then if you get the same level of qualifications from the reputed universities, then certainly you are an achiever.
Yeah.
And I see that the health and education has been the excellent examples Australia can deliver.
Yeah.
And the health system here has been fantastic, much better than any other country in Europe or US, and, any other country. And that's why that we didn't go to a complete shutdown, because we have enough ventilators and enough ICU beds, and therefore the government thought that we could manage it if it got worse.
Yeah.
And therefore we didn't have to go to a complete shutdown.
Yeah.
Whereas some countries like Sri Lanka, we had very limited medical resources, health resources. Therefore, we had no choice but to go to a complete shutdown.
Yeah.
So I think we had to give the credit to the system that we have an excellent health system. So that if you come as an immigrant, that's an opportunity for you. That's what you are enjoying. So basically, what we are telling people is long term, Australia is an opportunity for you.
Yeah.
And look at Australia very positively.
Yeah.
And if you're thinking of, it's a global program, migration is a global movement, and people are migrating to Canada, US, Europe, Australia, and many other places in the world. And but I think Australia will have the number one priority than any other country in the world after this pandemic, and that's obvious. And but it's up to the Australian government to conduct and choose how to run this program. And we hope and we continue to lobby the government that the government should bring more investors and skillful people that benefits the country, benefits the economy.
I agree.
And Susantha, people who are here in temporary visa and student visa, what is their situation?
Temporary visa holders are not given any government benefits at this stage. The government has limitations because 600,000 students here, and then another about 1 million temporary visa holders. However, the government has given a lot of benefits in given visa extensions in a more sympathetic and flexible way. And also, if you are employed for more than 12 months in Australia, even on a temporary visa, as a temporary visa holder, you can access your superannuation early if you have lost your job and if you have no income. So that opportunity is there.
And I think some of the universities, they're offering grants and all.
We actually said that as soon as it came out, we said that it's the university's responsibility than the government's responsibility, because there's a direct connection between the students and the universities. And we can see that all the universities have come out now with packages and assistance, which is an excellent news. And education is such an important aspect to this country. And Australia has 4 main items in this economy and resources. Number one, agriculture, tourism, and international education. The international education is one of the 4. And I think we have challenges to all the sectors other than agriculture. But agriculture will certainly continue. And we are a world leader in agriculture. We are a world leader in resources. But the tourism sector and international education sector has these challenges, but we need to overcome those challenges.
And Susantha, when I had a lot of queries from some of our clients who are parents who are residing in Sri Lanka, which they have their children currently in Australia. one of the question was, yes, that the government want them to have their own financial support in this time, but if any medical emergency or medical support required, would the Australian hospital system support them? I think obviously they'll help. There's no limitation as such. What do you think on that?
If you're certainly affected by COVID, I think the Australian society has an interest to look after you. So regardless of your the health benefits or the entitlements, I think you're eligible to have your treatments, the best treatments in the world in Australia. And that's a good news. But certainly no financial assistance from the government, and we cannot expect the government to support the international students. And but the government will extend other supports to the universities.
But I think every international student will have their private health insurance anyway as a requirement, entry requirement to the country. So that will help up to a certain level, I guess.
Absolutely, yes.
Yes, and I want to open this discussion to every one of you because I've seen some information that in a pandemic situation like this, which country would be the best place to be in, right? And there was a list of countries, and Australia was on top of the list because we are far away, large island. The density is very minimum and full of natural resources. Agriculture sector is very strong, and because of that, it is a better place. And we are proud that Sri Lanka also in that list on the top 10, which is good. So that is another reason that I think a lot of investors will look into Australia in the long run. And also Australia being natural resource country full of natural resources, and in this situation now China, where it started, and now they have sort of come out of it's under control, and their manufacturing already started, and Australia being the biggest and largest natural resource supplier to China, which they have already started manufacturing and supplying to the rest of the world. How would that situation helping to Australian economy and our recovery process, I guess?
Yeah, I think there's a few things to look at. Purely looking at it from a building standpoint, we're getting a lot of materials from China. We're getting a lot of it. There'll be potentially taps or something like that. So having that manufacturing back only stimulates what we're trying to do, and also stimulates their economy. So that's a positive for us. But I think the biggest thing to look at, and why Australia's potentially number one and Sri Lanka's doing a fantastic job, the stability of not only the economy but also the government is a key factor in amongst all of this. If you compare us to different locations and whether they were acting too early or whether they weren't acting quick enough or they just weren't putting things in, that's something to really look at from an investment standpoint. And if you're looking at China and what they did, or if you're looking at the US and or they've handled it, I think that's one thing that's extremely important. You're actually buying something. You're not just buying a property, but you're buying into that location of health and tourism and government and all of the factors that come a part of it.
Yeah,
I think that's extremely important from that point of view. And I think China, just getting back to the manufacturing standpoint, I think is fantastic. The sooner that we can get that back up and running, the better. And a lot of purchasing and import-export is coming out of there. So and hopefully we can start exporting some of our materials to them quickly as we can.
And on top of that, I think agricultural sector in Australia and livestock will have no impact, and they'll be continue to export, and that sector will continue to grow as it's normal. And where the rest of the world couldn't do their supplies and manufacturing's down, which Australia still can do that. And I think that's a good way of thinking of the current Australian government, where it's not completely locked down. Everything is running as usual, even though it might be slower, but still supplying, which is good.
I think so. There's 4 pillars, as I mentioned: the resources sector, and then agriculture, tourism, and industrial education. These are key sectors, and I think Australia will have a great role to play in the world, especially in the resources and agriculture. And Australia will continue to maintain those sectors, and then we can sustain our economy. That's why the Australian government is able to extend this much money, funds to the economy, to the country, for job seeker, job keeper programs, other tax benefits, and many other benefits, and a lot of resources to the health sector, the education sector, and also the social sector, looking at people's mental health and so forth. So therefore, Australian government is doing an excellent job, and we are able to do that. That is because we are capable, and that's why Australia is potential to be on the top of the list.
And I think they've I think they've probably learnt a lot from the GFC. If you look at what they did then and now what they're doing now, I can't remember the exact figure of how much they spent throughout the GFC, but now spending $300 billion on those initiatives. So that's a huge investment from a government standpoint.
And I think, Josh, on that point, the cost of that 300 billion is all-time low. The interest rates are all-time low, which is a fantastic position to recovery at the moment, I guess.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the biggest benefits of where we currently are. I think if you looked at the GFC, banks and things like that weren't coming to the party, so to speak, as much as what they have come now. Banks are now loaning at the lowest interest rate in Australian history. So you've got the banks on side, you've got the government on side. There's all of these things where the Australian economy as a whole is now really working towards making it out of this. We're hopefully going to be in the best position that we ever have been in the very, very near future.
If you look at the GFC time period, the property prices dropped, but it bounced back very quickly. Like within 12 months, about 15% growth. I think it's a similar situation now as well. Because if you look at the property cycle, now we're at the recovery stage. And all the bank lending is at very low interest rates, and property prices are low. So all those are healthy signs of property market getting better.
And I think on that point, Dikshana, if you look at the previous recessions which Australia gone through, 2008, 90s, and then 1930s and all, it bounced back with a higher percentage and the slowest possible time, which is good. Right?
So I think investors' point of view, this is a good time to invest.
If you are a buyer,
The ultimate message to you is basically that Australia is the best place for your immigration, your investments in properties. There's no better place than Australia. So therefore, it could be your first choice, and you're safe. And also that this is a time that the country should help the other countries, and the companies should help companies, and people should help people. So therefore, I think it's time to help each other. So it's basically, you may think that one person is doing better than you, but it's not the case. So therefore, you need to look at the bigger picture. And then if you help each other, if you have that attitude, as a country, as a company, as an individual, then suddenly our society can sustain this pandemic, and we can come out better.
And I think these days there's a very popular hashtag, Together We Can, and we should be focusing on everyone together. We should face to this difficult time and come out of that as a one team. And on that point, I just wanted to quickly point out from Dwellings Group, we're extending support for people who are here, and Susantha have needy people. If anything, we'll share our details at the end. Give us a call. We are more than happy to help for students who are staying here, for their parents in Sri Lanka or any other country, need any support, any advice, we can go through that. And I think we don't have time. We have a time limitation. This is an interesting discussion. In overall, one last question I want to point to Susantha now. Was these any of these migration programs currently on hold, or is it continuing as usual? Is there
nothing's on hold? Everything's continuing as usual, but probably on a lower speed, I should say, and nothing's on hold at the moment. So we are getting visa grants every week, every other week, but probably in a slow pace. And the government has announced some priority sectors. If you fall into those priority sectors like healthcare, aged care, and all that, I think is given priority at this stage. Other than that, everything else is smoothly moving, and the program is the same. And there's no cut to the migration program for this financial year. But we are waiting to see the next financial year's migration program. That's why Australia has doing better than New Zealand because we have 100,000 places for the skill and business migration places a year. And that's important compared to New Zealand has only 30,000 places a year.
Right.
Because we could afford a larger number.
Yeah.
Correct.
So globally. So therefore Australia is still riding through this program.
Yeah.
And we hope that Australian government will continue to bring new migrants.
Yeah.
And we continue to lobby so.
Yeah.
And I think we should be very positive about the opportunities.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Josh, now we have to recap this discussion, but finally, what's the your message to our investors, and what offers you're actually offering to investors coming in this time as well? And I mean, I know you are not a stranger to Sri Lankan community. You've been in Sri Lanka a couple of times in events, and you actually had to stop by last visit because of the travel restrictions.
Disappointed about that. I still want to get back.
And we will continue to do this and come back and help our investors. But what's the message?
The message from me is that whilst it seems like not the best time, for me it 100% is. Interest rates are as low as they've ever been. There's going to be fantastic incentives out there. Hermitage, as an example, we're offering that we'll pay the construction loan period, so the mortgage up until the point of pretty much completion. So we're assisting with repayments. We're trying to take the risk out of it for people because there's always risk in anything, but this is one of the most educated risks I think that you can have. Property always goes up. If you look at every financially fit person out there, a lot of them have built wealth through property. There's been other assets that they've had, but property being a major one. The building industry now is an essential service, so it won't stop. So for us, a big concern that a lot of people have is, will you be building the property? If I purchase the property, will you build it? And in short, the answer is yes. The Australian government has marked the building industry and construction industry as an essential service, and most of the time now we're actually building them in a very, very safe way in relation to COVID. So we've only got one trade on there, but that trade now doesn't have 10 people that they're jumping over each time. They've actually got the space. So
that will actually drive the quality as well, right?
It drives the quality, and it also sometimes even increases the speed because they don't have to wait for someone to finish, and they just go in, they do their whole job, and then they get there. So to summarise it, good time to buy. The build quality is going to be as good, if not better. The Australian government and the initiatives that they have in place is all the more reason to be looking at Australia from an investment and a migration standpoint. Okay. I think that it's what Australia has done has put Australia on the map in that sense.
Correct. And Deekshana, to recap financially, in terms of obtaining finance, still banks are lending for non-residents, right?
Yes.
I mean, it is as everything else, might be slow, but still people can go through this application process.
Yeah, still we can go through the FIRB process, we can go through the finance process, there's no restrictions, but as Susantha mentioned, the process is a bit slow. That's the only thing.
That's the only thing. So I think we'll have to finish this discussion, and once again, thank you so much for being with us and listening to us. But if you do have any questions and any support from any of our panel members, please contact us. Dwellings Group website, all the contact details available. And Susantha, your website is
www.fairfieldlawyers.com.
Yes, and so any support, contact us. We are more than happy to help you. And once again, listen to your government advisors, stay safe and stay home until it's cleared out, because this is something that we have to do it together.
Yeah,
and listen to the advisors and obey the rules. And then I think as a one team, we can come out of this. And thank you so much. I wish you a very happy New Year. And I go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Vishvavahini.